The following program is a sports handicapping show. That's right, we will be discussing sports betting and all kinds of other gambling stuff, including game predictions. As you know, not every bet will win, but we do our best. Feel free to use this information at your own risk, and remember, wager wisely, folks.
Broadcasting from the Vegas Video Network studios, live from the Las Vegas Strip, Covers.com presents Vegas SportsDay. And now from the sports betting capital of the world, here are your hosts, Teddy and the Professor.
It's Tuesday in Sin City, and you are watching Vegas SportsDay, the pulse of the sports betting world. I'm your host, Teddy Covers, joined, as always, by my esteemed colleague, the Professor, Dave Malinsky.
Coming up today, as we break down some key conference tournaments, we're going to tell you about some underdogs at good price points that could be working on a dream. Yeah, remember, Bruce live at the Apollo Friday night. It's all Bruce and the leads this week. Available on XM, so you'll be able to listen to it live. We're going to talk about the Rockets' problems since the All-Star break, and how if they're going to correct them in Boston, they're going to have to prove it all night on the boards. And the Horizon Conference Tournament final tonight, what's been a pretty extreme shooting pendulum, we believe changes. This evening, it's not just another roll of the dice.
Dave, first take for a Tuesday. Obviously, lots of great tournament action last night. March is here. What did you see that you want to share with our viewing audience?
March is here, but don't ignore the NBA. Anybody knows how good Ty Lawson has been the last couple of days? Now, this is a theme we've talked about a few times. In this short sprint of a schedule, a lot of guys are out there tired. So players who miss time because of injury, get a little bit of a break, have come back and been very dynamic. Lawson was out for 9 days. Since he came back, take a look at these numbers. 19.5 points a game, 7 rebounds a game, which is just staggering for a guy his size and his position. But how about 48 assists versus only 7 turnovers? You can make a case Ty Lawson's been the best player in the NBA since the All-Star break. Be looking for those guys in the games ahead. Those that get a little bit of a break, especially speed players, are going to be ahead of opponents who may be a little bit winded. Ty Lawson has certainly proven to be that case. You're probably going to college, though, aren't you?
You have to. It's March, you know. I mean, did you see what happened last night? Classic March Madness before, obviously, the real March Madness begins next week. And we've talked a lot about how exciting these conference tournaments are, what an outstanding betting opportunity they are in comparison to March Madness. I mean, just take a look at the cards for Wednesday and Thursday. We're going to have more games on Wednesday or Thursday of this week than you'll have for the entirety of the NCAA tournament. Good betting opportunities. So what did we see last night? Well, there were 11 lined college basketball games. 10 of those games were decided by 7 points or less. The 6 games where the spread was -6 or lower, dogs went 5-1 against the spread, including 3 outright winners. So the Leathernecks get a win last night. The Chippewas, the Huskies from Northern Illinois, all pulling the outright upsets as big dogs in these ball games. 8 of the 11 games decided by 4 points or less. Yeah, guys, it's March. It's going to be a lot of fun over the course of the next few weeks. And just last night, as an example, is showing us rather clearly this time of the year, it's not about how well you played in November or December or January. It's not about how bad you look coming down the stretch. It's about what your A game is and what you can bring to a conference tournament setting. We're going to see a lot of exciting basketball over the course of the next few weeks. So, a ton of ground to cover today. We have a very busy show. Let's get right to it, starting with the mailbag and a question from Aram that may be on the minds for a lot of you. Aram asks, quote, "The last thing on earth I want to have happen is to get caught with my pants down in the tourney if I bet on a team like VCU or Drexel and they get a crew of refs who won't let them play physical. Is there a way to find out who the refs are for a particular region or even individual games and what conferences they're from? I would hate to have money on VCU with a Pac-12 crew calling the game." Excellent question, Aaron. We got an answer for him, Dave?
Yeah, it's something we've talked about on this show before. One of the things you like about conference play in basketball, there's a consistency there because the officials get to know the players, get to know the coaches. Similar to the NBA, when there's that little bit of choreography involved, they can anticipate. NCAA tournament, first round can be a little bit awkward because you've got a lot of officials calling teams they haven't seen before. Gets real clean after that. Once you get through the first round, you've got nothing but very good officials, and many of them in the second round games are calling teams that they just saw in the first round anyway. A team like VCU, though, was a surprising example last year. We would have thought that VCU would have been a team that would have struggled in the tournament because, again, they're very aggressive, on defense very physical, and an official who might not have seen them all season might have been a little bit quick on the whistles. That wasn't the case. They were a little bit lenient with them. So, yes, you can find these. The NCAA website will have it. You can go to some of the conference websites for this particular week to see who's calling which games. Problem is, the data samples are so small with the officials, we can't necessarily tell you who lets a physical game be played and who doesn't. Because, again, when the samples are small, it's dependent upon which particular teams were also part of those samples. So, yes, the rotations are out there. The numbers just aren't going to help you very much, but it's only a first-round consideration anyway.
Yeah, and let me ask you this, Dave, because, I mean, in baseball, we use umpire data, home plate umpire. It's something that has been a consistent moneymaker and something the betting market has undervalued over the years. When it comes to basketball, can you really look at the refs and say, oh, yeah, these guys are going to whistle a bunch of, they're going to be calling every touch foul, and another group might not? Do you have that type of a breakdown, whereas one umpire might have a very narrow strike zone good for over bettors, and another one might have a very wide strike zone good for unders? Is there anything like that in college hoops?
No, unfortunately there isn't. And because, again, the problem is sample size. You'd have to sit down and break down play by play.
Sure.
Because what you might think is an official calling a game tight, calling for a lot of hacks. No, it was a close game, and there were a lot of fouls at the end. So you have to be careful with that. You'd have to do all of your play-by-plays, and even if you do that, these guys are only going to have 30, 40 games a year under some of their belts. That's just not enough to work with.
Yeah, and of course, my line service, the Sports Options live odds screen, will have the referees posted in the hour or so before a game time. But utilizing that information effectively in that short window, in my mind, a fairly difficult thing to do. All right, let's shift over to market watch, and it's time to talk conference tournament futures. Yesterday, we took a look at the futures of the Big East Conference Tournament at Madison Square Garden. Just a quick scoring update for that ball game. Right now, UConn 79-67 with a $1.50 left. So the Huskies in position to win and cover. I'm not sure they're going to be able to do it. The closing line there was 10. But we talked about why these futures really offer value at this time of the year in yesterday's Big East discussion. And again, let's reiterate, while these lines are based on each team bringing their A game, the bottom line is for these conference tournament settings, there are many instances and many situations where teams are not likely to bring those A games. That means some legitimate overlays for us to be able to take advantage of. So let's get back to work, starting with the leagues that begin tomorrow. Let's start in Memphis with Conference USA. Now, Conference USA is basically Memphis versus the field. Memphis, a minus 280 favorite to win that tournament. The two shortest dogs, Southern Miss plus 525, Central Florida plus 800. Everyone else 15-1 or higher. Dave, anything we can do with this?
Now, Memphis takes it home. They're passing the eye test right now. A team that had some chemistry issues early in the year, playing good basketball under the radar down the stretch. This might be one of those Sweet 16, Elite 8 type of sleepers. Very difficult to envision them losing this. But here's what you want to do, though. If you like Memphis, instead of laying this number on the future book, you're going to probably get better odds just playing them on the money line. 3 consecutive games. You get a little bit better return on your investment. They're building to a crescendo right now. I think they'd also like to win the tournament. That's going to be a big part of our discussions today. Teams that actually want to win this. Hard to see anyone else getting in Memphis' way on that court.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Let's shift focus over to the Big 12 in Kansas City. And this is going to be a fun tournament this year, Dave. From the impressions I've been getting, reading through the local news reports, we got a lot of good teams that are coming to play in KC this week. The Jayhawks, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, obviously the favorite here. They've been one of the best teams in the country all year. A plus 110 to win it all. Then you have Missouri at plus 185. Those two would have to be considered the co-favorites. The next grouping, Baylor plus 650, Kansas State plus 1,100, Iowa State plus 1,150, Texas plus 1,500. and then you have the real long shots with Okie State, Oklahoma, A&M, and Texas Tech. But of that grouping, Dave, boy, the Iowa State Cyclones stand out to me.
Iowa State, Baylor, Kansas State, all teams that are good and all that would like to win this. This one's going to get tricky, and we'll probably be talking about this on Friday when we get some of the individual games. Some of the best basketball we've seen all year, the two Kansas-Missouri head-to-heads. Absolutely dynamic play. They extended out to 85 minutes. One of the games went to overtime. Both ended out to the final shot of regulation. If you're Bill Self, do you want a third go-round? Yeah, that might not necessarily be the best way to set your team up for a run into the NCAA tournament. For Frank Haith, I think you take it. This is your last go-round in the Big 12 tournament. If you're Missouri, yeah, that would be something special to take that banner home with you. So if you're Self, you may not want that matchup, which could impact your player rotation the day before. When we come back in our next one, we got a couple of coaches we'll talk about who we can see by the numbers don't care to win. I think Bill Self might be one of these guys that may not be going after this tournament all the way. So maybe we look to a couple of these other teams at the right price.
Yeah, I agree 100%. If you read what Self was saying down the stretch of the regular season, he was very focused on a regular season title, and he's very focused on the next bigger tournament that starts next week. I'm not convinced the Jayhawks are going to have focus for this tournament. And Missouri, as the other co-favorite here, I think they're vulnerable. And the more times you see what Missouri does over the course of a season, the better you're likely to be able to play against them in any kind of rematch. So I really think that this second tier here, the Kansas States, the Iowa States, I'm not sure about Texas, because if Texas doesn't get the calls, they're not winning the games. But, of course, Texas in that bubble spot. But K-State, Iowa State, both 11.5 to 1. I think there's real value with both of those squads at the current numbers.
So one of the things we'll talk about, similar to a horse racing phrase, where we think that there's a favorite out there that's not all that good, and say, let's box this horse out. Means you're going to take a collection of a few others, and if the favorite runs out of the money, you're going to come away with something. Big 12 looks like it's going to be one of those. Best bet is if you could simply find a Kansas will not win, maybe laying about $1.40 or $1.50, that's not too bad to go into, but we'll take a couple of these teams, box Kansas out of the Big 12.
Great question from Aram today, and we appreciate that. Please keep those emails coming in. The address, of course, sportsday@covers.com. We've been getting good questions all day today and dating back to yesterday. Lots of stuff to answer on air this week and next, but keep them coming. Again, sportsday@covers.com. You can follow us on Twitter @VegasSportsDay. And, of course, you can get involved in the community, covers.com/posting forum with active threads and discussions going right now. And I've been promising for days to give out the big tournament preview show announcement. We're going to be live on remote. Dave, we can't announce yet today, can we?
Soon.
But right now, as well. I'm sorry. Go.
No, let's go. Getting more?
Yeah, of course I got more. Come on. That's my job. I got to yabber when there's nothing to talk about. Bottom line is we have IT guys right now on location ensuring that everything will go smoothly for our live remote. It's going to be on Wednesday night. There's going to be, a 3-on-3 basketball tournament with girls from Sapphire Gentlemen's Club. But we're not going to announce the location until we have everything dotted. So got to wait another 24, guys. We will be having this party. I expect you to be here with us if you're in Las Vegas on the Wednesday before the tournament, but details will have to wait until tomorrow.
What can't wait is we got a few more tournaments to break down, and could be the best handicapper of the week be Roy Williams' caddy. We'll tell you what that means coming up next. You're watching Vegas Sports Day.
Are you looking for the latest odds, the fastest scores, the most important trends, and the best matchups and stats? Are you looking for the key late-breaking information that can make you a winner? Well, Covers.com has the answer. The world's largest sports betting community gives you a front row seat in the heart of the action, from the opening lines to the final scores. If you want to stay ahead of the game, Covers covers the numbers.
No pressure. Hi, I'm Dennis Silvers from, can't think of the name of my damn show, Golf and Other Four-Letter Words, and you're watching the Vegas Video Network, I think.
Okay, it's a market watch time. We're going through the conference tournaments, taking a look at odds to win it all. And let's now shift our focus over to the Pac-12. We'll be playing at the Staples Center in LA. Lots of talk about the Pac-12 potentially moving that tournament right here to Las Vegas in the future.
We don't want it.
But
not this year.
Yeah, not this year. We don't know.
Not these teams.
But for now, it's at the Staples Center in LA. Let's take a look at some of the numbers. I'm not going to run them through all of them here, but Cal's the favorite at plus 240. And yes, plus 240, that's the biggest dog of any favorite in these major conferences that we're talking about. Washington next, Arizona, Oregon, all at less than 5-1. UCLA at 6-1. Stanford at 10-1. Colorado, who's been a pretty good regular season team, not respected in the markets. They are actually the 7th favorite coming out of the Pac-12 at plus 14. And the long shots, Oregon State, Washington State, Arizona, USC, and Utah, none of whom have played good basketball basically at any point this season. So from that grouping, Dave, the entire conference stubbed its toe over the final weekend of the season. Cal had a chance to win the outright title, couldn't do it. Washington ends up sneaking into the title despite losing their must-win game as well. Anyone or anything we like out of the Pac-12?
Yeah, here's another good window of opportunity. The top 3 teams all stumbled bad this past weekend, even adding Arizona, an embarrassing loss to Arizona State. Bottom line is none of those teams are very good. You would not expect them to step up under the particular pressure. So here's the window of opportunity. Best team in the Pac-12 in the month of February, Oregon, 7-2 straight up, 9-0 against the spread. You can take a nice little price with them, who also was playing pretty good basketball and stood up pretty well this weekend. How about UCLA? And our good friends at the Gold Sheet probably covered this best. Last week on the show, we talked about the Sports Illustrated article coming out about the Bruins and about all the problems in the program. And the Gold Sheet comes out and wants to back UCLA this weekend, saying, yeah, like this is news. Like, look, everybody in Westwood has known this all along. If anything, the kids seem to come together and play better. If you saw the way UCLA handled Washington in the second half on Saturday, you don't see that UCLA is 6-1 here and Washington's at a shorter price. How about some Oregon and some UCLA should get a plus 475 or a plus 500 with Oregon, 6-1 with UCLA. Yeah, that works against teams above them who just simply aren't that good.
Yeah, and I mean, of the teams that Dave didn't mention, I might take a look at Stanford, a team that is kind of haven't been one of my favorite teams so far this year. I've kind of had a rough read on the Cardinal, but boy, they played some good basketball down the stretch. A team that kind of played well early in the campaign, stubbed their toe repeatedly throughout late January into February, and played much better down the stretch. The resounding road win at Colorado. With Cal coming to town to the farm last weekend, Stanford basically, Cal played well. Stanford played great. They were the better team on the floor. They prevented Cal from earning that Pac-12 title. So Cardinal team, again, we're talking about a 10-1 shot. We're not talking about a favorite here, but might be a decent shot to find a way to win a couple of games. And if you get to the championship game, obviously, you can hedge off the Cardinal and lock in a profit. Let's head now to the Big Ten tournament in Indianapolis. I'm going to run through some of the chalk here. Ohio State and Michigan State basically co-favorites, both in that plus 180, plus 190 range. Michigan and Indiana, the next two, is going to be essentially a home tournament for the Hoosiers, not in Bloomington, but they will certainly have plenty of crowd support in Indy. Wisconsin also can be grouped in with Michigan and Indiana. And the next grouping, Purdue at 20-1, which I think, man, that's a good price on Purdue, who's playing some excellent basketball. And the longer shots in Northwestern, Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, and Penn State. But Dave, this sure looks like a tournament where the chalk is vulnerable and potentially not all that interested.
Stepping way up in class here, off of the Pac-12. Think about that Purdue, number 6 at 20-1. They'd be favored if they were at the Staples Center, out there this week. Yeah, totally different mindset. In the Pac-12, everyone's all out to win because everyone has to. No one is guaranteed. Ohio State and Michigan State know they're on their way to the big dance. Now, maybe you could make a case we want to play for a number 1 seed. Guys like Tad Matta, Tom Izzo have been around long enough to know that for all the bluster you're going to hear on ESPN and others about, oh, you want that number 1 seed, it's not that big a deal. Especially on the serpentine format. There's about a credit card's width of difference between being the last number 1 seed and the first number 2. So it doesn't matter that much. So here are the issues coming into play. Matta's got a team without a lot of depth. Does 3 games in 3 days in a physical conference help his team to get ready? Or does it wear them down a little bit? Maybe not a lot of motivation for Tad Matta. But now we look to Michigan State, and here's been a consistent pattern. Tom Izzo has not carried all that much about winning this tournament. And now he's got to come in without Brandon Dawson, who's been a key cog. Dawson got hurt against Ohio State on Sunday. He won't play again this year. Let's take a look at Tom Izzo and how he's fared through the years in this tournament. Last 11 years, how about 9-11 straight up, but 7-13 against the spread. In 11 seasons, one of the best programs in all of college basketball has only made the Big Ten final one time, and they lost it. If Izzo did not care that much in the past, knowing 3-3 isn't that big a deal. Why does Izzo care this year?
Yeah, and again, so then we look at the next grouping, and Michigan's a good team. I don't know that Michigan is positioned to win this tournament. I don't know they're going to get to the first round. They got to play Northwestern. The Wolverines, I just don't see the Wolverines built as a team to make an extended tournament run both here or in the bigger tournament next weekend. So where does that leave us? We talked about Purdue at 20-1. I think they're very live. And Indiana in that 5.5 or 6-1 range with the crowd support. I think the Hoosiers worth a look in this tournament. And much like the ones we've been talking about. We're not talking about the teams at the very top where you're not getting max value. You're not talking about the teams at the very bottom that aren't very good. Those mid-range teams, those good but maybe not great teams that tend to offer the best value in these conference tournaments. Let's do one more before we go to break, and that is the ACC, where North Carolina, the clear chalk here, Tar Heels minus 145 on the to win the conference tournament odds. Duke at plus 230, and then everyone else is a long shot. And North Carolina and Duke at the top. Florida State, Virginia, the next two in line. Then Miami, Florida, and NC State, 25 and 30-1 respectively. Clemson 50-1, Virginia Tech, Maryland, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and Boston College, all prohibitive long shots to win the ACC tournament. So here we are in Atlanta, Dave. What do we look for?
Maybe the best window of opportunity that we're going to find. We just have to figure out the best way to get to it. Something we talked about on the show last week, and let's talk about it again. Where is Roy Williams going to be come Sunday? Are we going to see Roy sitting on the sidelines for North Carolina wearing a suit? Or are we going to see Roy out there swinging a club somewhere on a golf course? In the past, Roy Williams has probably shown as little interest in winning this tournament as any major coach anywhere. How about 13-2 against the spread lifetime in this tournament? It means a shopper might have been able to go as much as 15-2 playing against him. That may be even more pronounced this year. One is you don't have any depth at all. This is probably the shortest rotation he's had to deal with. Two is you have absolutely nothing to prove. Whatever he wanted to prove with this group before the big dance, he did that in Durham on Saturday night. So now you got a short bench. 3-3 doesn't help you. No particular reason to want to play Duke at all because that's kind of a no-win situation. So there's going to be value to try to knock North Carolina out. Question is, who do we do it with? Now, part of the problem, your best candidates, Florida State and Duke, they run into each other on Saturday. Or ideally, if they win, they run into each other. So sometimes you don't like to have teams that will cross each other early. Your option on the Carolina side of the bracket, though, is Virginia. And they've shown head-to-head against Carolina, they just don't match up well with them on the boards. So we got to take a little time to think about this. We'll have tomorrow's show to clarify just a little bit more. But maybe, Teddy, if we can just find a price to bet against Carolina, instead of betting other teams, since Carolina's favored, if we could find a dog price, take $1.20, $1.25, that Carolina won't win, maybe we try that.
Absolutely. Carolina versus Field betting the Field in that instance makes a lot of sense to me. And you talked about some of the issues here because the three best teams, the three best contenders for beating Carolina wouldn't face them until the finals. You know, we talked about Duke and Florida State, those two teams who have to match up in the semis if they advance past the first round. And if Florida State doesn't get there, you know, we're talking about Miami, who can match up with anybody in this league, really. But they're going to have to go through Florida State and Duke both in order to get to the ACC final. No easy task for the Hurricanes. That's why even at 25-1, a little bit reluctant about pulling the trigger on Miami.
Coming up next, can Houston end a losing streak since the All-Star break? We'll tell you literally if they can rebound from that as money time begins.
This is David Ivey from Pub Crawl. It's funny because this is David from. You should just leave it on. Hi. I'm David Ivey from Pub Crawl, and you're watching the Vegas Video Network. And scene.
Livestream is your premier place to watch live events on the web, mobile devices, and connected TVs. See new events daily or broadcast your own at livestream.com. Livestream. Be there.
Okay, guys, it's money time. This edition of Money Time is brought to you by Covers.com. Remember, for all the key information you need in every sport, Covers covers the numbers. Let's start tonight with the NBA card in Boston, where the Celtics, about a 4.5-point favorite at home against the Houston Rockets. And we're going to use the phrase two teams heading in opposite directions. We're going to probably every day when we talk about the second half of various sports seasons. And in some ways, this is no exception. Houston, 1-3 straight up, 0-4 against the spread since the All-Star break. They've lost those games by a total of 45 points against the spread. Boston, they're on a 4-0 straight up run since the All-Star break. But we take a little bit of a closer look. Celtics just 1-3 against the number in regulation. They were able to get a point spread cover in overtime. Their 4-point win against the Knicks this past Sunday. But the bottom line, Boston struggling to win games by margin, even though they have this 4-0 hot streak coming out of the All-Star break. Now, this is a very crucial time for Houston. They played 8 of their last 9 at home. They've had kind of a friendly schedule in recent weeks. Well, this game begins a 5-game road trip for the Rockets, 7 of their next 8 on the highway. And after losing back-to-back-to-back games at home, Houston, this is a crucial time for a team that's right now sitting in the number 8 seed in the West, but not a lot of margin for error with 3 teams within a game and a half of them in the standings.
The Houston issues, they're real easy to see. They're getting beat on the boards. Houston's now been out-rebounded their last 10 games in a row, and if anything since the break, it's gotten worse instead of better. So let's take a look at not only how bad they're losing in those 10, how bad it's been since the break. Over the last 10 games, Houston out-rebounded by 7.6 per game. That 0-10, they lost the boards in every single one. Since the All-Star break, about a minus 11.5 per game. That's big over a 4-game sample in the NBA. Usually it doesn't stretch out that far for that long. So that's going to be their issue tonight, particularly against the way the Celtics play. Houston needs to be able to run. Well, when you don't get rebounds, you can't run. Boston, number 24 in the NBA in terms of tempo. Houston doesn't want to play that way. They're going to have to get out and snatch a few, try to beat the Celtics down the court. And the nice thing is that door may be open a little bit with no Jermaine O'Neal. The Celtics aren't as dominating as they used to be, but there is a point guard Houston has to deal with.
Yeah, and the rebounding numbers are really interesting to talk about because you look at the Rockets' 2 key low-post cogs in terms of Samuel Dallenberg, Luis Scola. They're both rebounding at the same rate that they've been rebounding all year. They both had 12 boards in the overtime loss against the Clippers. 9 of the combined rebounds came on the offensive glass in that ballgame. But it's been the supporting cast for Houston that hasn't gotten the job done on the boards. And, of course, Hakeem Shabbat still struggling through injuries, which leaves Houston a little bit shorthanded when it comes to that backup center position. But when you look at the full long season numbers, Houston ranks number 15 in the NBA in rebounding margin, well ahead of Boston in that category. The Celtics not a great rebounding team, and even less so, as Dave mentioned, without Jermaine O'Neal. But the one thing the Celtics do have, man, they've got a point guard who is clicking on all cylinders right now. Rajon Rondo, 47 points, 44 assists, and 30 rebounds combined in the last 3 ball games, all Celtics wins. It's very rare to average a triple-double over a 3-game span. Not sure if Rondo can keep up that pace here. But, again, we talk about Houston being in a position where they're a little bit desperate, a little bit hungry. You have to wonder tonight if Boston's a little bit fat and happy now they've reeled off 4 consecutive victories.
Let's move over to Dallas, where the Mavericks right now are a 2-point favorite over the Knicks. Big window of opportunity missed by Dallas last night. Played a lot of zone defense against Oklahoma City. Got Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook to shoot 12 for 38. Still couldn't win the game. Big part of that becomes another transition that Rick Carlisle's going to have to go through tonight. Boy, he's had a lot of these this year. Remember 2 weeks ago, we ran a chart showing all the Dallas players that have played in every game this year. It was Sean Marion's name by itself on the screen. Well, just when they thought they were getting some of the pieces back together, Brendan Haywood goes out in the first minute last night at Oklahoma City with a sprained ankle. He's not going to play tonight. More shuffling of the rotation. The one thing, too, we were watching very closely last night, and it does matter with Haywood out, Lamar Odom back on the court, but not really back on form. Look at these Odom numbers last night. Only 3 for 9 from the field, 2 rebounds, 0 assists in 24 minutes and 19 seconds. They've got to get Odom to step up. When you look at the way that Anthony and Sotomayor can be going to the basket tonight without Haywood there, Odom has to be a presence. And sometimes when his offensive game isn't there, his confidence falls off. None of his game is there. So it's difficult for the odds makers to set a price on Dallas right now because they're shuffling again. But is there a harder team in the NBA to price right now than the Knicks?
Yeah, no question. I mean, the Knicks pricing is a lot of guesswork right now. That's why we've seen such a dramatic line move on this ball game. Dallas opened 4.5-point chalk. They've been bet down to -2, based on obviously a lot of money coming in on New York, a team that the betting markets and the odds makers both are struggling to price correctly these days. And it's not just about Linsanity. And remember, Linsanity was on full display when these two teams met just a few weeks ago at Madison Square Garden. The Knicks closed out that game on an 8-0 run. And Jeremy Lin was the key component during that stretch. He had a couple of big shots, hit some free throws, and basically carried the Knicks on his back to that victory over the Mavs. It's not just Linsanity. It's not just the fact that the Knicks are a quote-unquote public team these days, but the schedule has made for a very difficult read. So is the team chemistry for New York, with basically a whole new bench now than what they had a month ago. But look at the schedule issues, because that's definitely something that's worthy to note here. The 30 NBA teams, the Knicks' strength of schedule, they're number 30. No one in the league has played a weaker slate than New York so far this season. And road games versus playoff teams. Knicks have played 37 games. Only 8 of them have been on the highway against teams that would currently be in the playoffs if the playoffs started today. The Knicks yet to win a ball game against one of these teams on the road. 3-5 against the number. Now let's note that second number, not an indictment, because this current group really hasn't been available for New York. It's been a hodgepodge of a season as Mike D'Antoni's trying to fit lots of new and different pieces into the equation. But the bottom line is they've only played 8 of 37 games on the road against teams that would currently make the playoffs. And tonight, only the second game outside of the Eastern time zone for the Knicks in the last 7 weeks. Yeah, they're going to be up against it schedule-wise over the second half of this campaign.
When we come back, the hallowed halls of Jadwin Gym at Princeton University and why one setting in the Ivy League just might be poison. You're watching Vegas Sports Day.
Traditional media believes that after about 3 minutes, you'll tune out. Most Vegas media companies think if it doesn't jiggle, you won't tune in. At the Vegas Video Network, we think both are wrong. The Vegas Video Network is the first and only live online broadcast network that specializes in insider news and expert views about Vegas. We combine great storytelling with the ability to watch when and where you want on your computer, mobile device, or television. Discover the real Las Vegas. Visit VegasVideoNetwork.com.
Well, let's break down a couple of games on the college hardwoods tonight in our second installment of Money Time. And we're going to start in Princeton, New Jersey, with the Ivy League title, outright title on the line here. Princeton -4.5 against Penn. And, you know, this is one of the most storied rivalries in all of college basketball. The 226th meeting between these two teams. Penn with a 123-102 straight-up advantage against Princeton. Don't know the all-time point spread results because we don't have point spread results from the matchup back in 1903.
I bet there was action.
I wouldn't surprise me if there was, but we don't have a database that's going to show us what the number was in that game. You know, why, were you in action on that game, Dave?
Would have been difficult.
All right. The first meeting between these two teams, Princeton shoots 57.8%, and they lost the game by 15. So when you're shooting just shy of 58% and you lose the game by 15, it tells you clearly there were issues elsewhere Well, number one, their own defense wasn't very good. Penn shot 53.1 from the floor, 55% from three-point range, and of course they won the battle of the boards 31-17, so a plus 14 rebounding margin for the Quakers. And this is a Princeton team that is, when you talk about a strong home court, this is a strong home court. 16 consecutive wins at home against Ivy League opponents, and no one has come within 6 points of the Tigers this season. But let's not forget, Penn did end Harvard's 28-game home winning streak earlier this campaign.
So some of you might be scratching your head a little bit. Penn is playing for a chance to go up against Harvard for the Ivy League championship and move on to the big dance. They're ahead of Princeton in the standings. They beat Princeton by 15. Yet it's Princeton that's laying 4.5? Yeah, there is a reason for that. First, note that part of why Penn is so high up in the Ivy League standings, 5-0 in games decided by 3 points or less. They've been very good, but maybe a little bit lucky. But there's one of the things you can do with these teams, and get in the habit of doing this through the years. Talk about travel partners. Various conferences have them. When you're a travel partner, that means that you're actually playing the same schedule. You have the same teams and the same settings, just one night off of each other. So here's why this line is where it is. Let's look at what happened since the first meeting in this series. There have been 10 games since then. Now, no, these are the same teams playing the same opponents. Princeton grades out 59 points better. They've been almost 6 full points per game better than Penn over a big sample. And Teddy talked to you about that 31-17 rebounding advantage for Penn in the first game. Look at the boards over the last 10. Princeton plus 55. That's 5.5 rebounds per game better. Tells you that 31-17 might have been just a little bit fluky. Remember, sometimes rebounding can be that way. When you look at the charts for these teams, there's not a big size gap. Both teams shoot a lot from the perimeter. What happens when perimeter shots miss? They take odd bounces. They go out at various different arcs. Every once in a while, when perimeter teams are shooting head-to-head, one team will simply get more bounces than the other. Bottom line is, over the last 10 games, Princeton's actually been a better basketball team than Penn. So before grabbing that 4.5 that might look like a market mistake, no, you might not want to be trapped into that one. If anything, if there's some Penn money later, no, -4, -3.5, maybe a little Princeton in our pockets this evening.
Horizon League showdown tonight on ESPN, playing for the Horizon League title. No, not Butler. Butler made the national championship game each of the last 2 years after winning their conference tournament. This year, I don't think the winner of Detroit or Valpo is going to go quite as far as Butler's been able to do, but nonetheless, should be a compelling TV matchup this evening. It's the third go-round between these two teams this year. They played 3 times last year. Valparaiso won all 3 meetings, all competitive, all by 10 points or less. But they came away with all 3 victories. And the 2 previous meetings this year, Valpo wins and covers both times again. So it's 5 straight wins and covers for Valpo in this series. They're playing tonight on their home floor, and yet, boy, this number seems relatively short. Detroit getting a lot of respect from the betting markets. Let's talk about the 2 meetings from this year. Valpo wins 73-71 as a 5-point road underdog against the Titans. A total there, 148.5. They win 78-73 as 2.5-point home favorites on this floor. Total there was 142, but a lot of stuff we can break down from those first 2 meetings this season, Dave, right?
We use the word pendulums every once in a while on this show, and it's a great way to handicap if you understand them properly. That means that you're looking at something that's extended too far in one direction or the other. Markets tend to take momentum, and they want to certify it. It's easy and it's comforting to do that. We take pendulums and say, you know what, this isn't where it should be. This has gone a little bit too far. These first 2 meetings between these teams, absolute classic examples of where basketball pendulums can go. Let's take a look at some of the key categories in those 2 head-to-head games, and then add up the final scores. We'll call this the floor game. Detroit had 20 more field goal attempts in those 2 games. Free throw attempts were dead even. Detroit had 2 more rebounds and 12 fewer turnovers. They win the turnover ratio by a dozen. So now add that up. You get more rebounds, you get fewer turnovers, those 20 more field goal attempts. Essentially, they're saying, okay, you teams go out there and play for 80 minutes. Detroit, we're going to give you 20 extra possessions. So how do you do that and still lose the games? Remember, rebounding fairly constant between these teams. These aren't Penn Princeton. These are teams a little more physical inside. The turnover battle, when you win it by a dozen over 80 minutes, that's pretty significant. So if you did that much right on the court and didn't win the game, could there be a little pendulum factor that maybe explains it?
I don't think there's any question about it, Dave. You look at the shooting numbers for these two teams this season, and you see how extreme it was to negate those Detroit floor game edges. The numbers don't lie. Valparaiso shot lights out against the Titans in both meetings. 52% from the floor versus 44% for Detroit. The Crusaders from three-point range, nearly 48% compared to 27% for U of D. Overall, we add up the numbers. Valpo shoots 48 of 92. Detroit shoots 50 of 112. So to even that count out, Valpo would have to go on a 2-20 shooting run to open tonight's game, which is possible, but not likely. Let's not forget the Crusaders plus 30 in terms of points scored from beyond the arc. This is the two games that were decided by a combined total of 7 points, and the Crusaders plus 30 in three-point shooting, despite taking only 5 more shots from three-point range. So you put all those factors together, you might expect the pendulums to swing back a little bit the other way this evening. And Jacob, that means it's time to throw up one more chart for our viewing audience, this time with a logo on it. Play of the day time, we'll take the Detroit Titans, Ray McCallum's kids, plus 2 at Valpo this evening. University of Detroit plus the points. That's the Vegas Sports Day play of the day. And that's going to wrap it up for our Tuesday edition. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to spend with us. For Malinsky, I'm Savransky. Enjoy the games and good luck. We'll see you again tomorrow.